Hello, my name is Lee Presser. This is my show. I speak frequently to very interesting people. Some of these conversations are so exciting, so intellectually stimulating, I thought others might like to listen in. This is the reason we started recording Conversation with Lee Presser.
Welcome to Conversation with Lee Presser. Dwight Kay was elected to the Illinois House of Representatives, District 112, at the November 2010 election. Declaring success during his first year in office, Mr. Kay has announced that he will seek a second term at the November 2012 elections. He said there's unfinished business which will take more than one term to accomplish. Lowering taxes and increasing job growth are top priorities. He supports a repeal of the 67% state income tax hike. Workers' compensation reform and legal reform of the civil courts are very important. He's here today to discuss what has been accomplished and his plans for the future. Dwight Kay, welcome to Conversation.
Thank you, Lee. It's good to be back.
Is that essentially correct, what I just said there?
It is.
You are running for re-election?
I decided to run for re-election after some careful thought. I think I've told you before, I'm not a career politician. I'm really a businessman. So working my way through Springfield in a sort of a non-business manner as they do it there, it made me pause a little bit. But there are things on the table that we need to do, and if we don't do them, the state will continue to suffer. So I'm going to press on.
For those who don't know, who are completely unaware, what is it that the state is suffering from right now?
Well, we have been fiscally irresponsible for 2 decades. And for those 2 decades, we have people in elected office who either have not understood the problem or have not understood how to fix the problem. So today, we look back over the past 20 years of issues, fiscal issues, and we have seen them pile on top of each other to the extent that we are now broke. And it's not a constructive brokenness. It's one that I'm being bankrupt as a state.
Okay, so what has happened in the 20 years, to your way of thinking, that has led to this? Some people would just come and say, oh, well, of course the state's broke because, you know, the Bush, you know, he crashed the economy, and so, you know, everybody's broke now. What is it that you saw over a 20-year period that led to the conditions that you're looking at?
Well, we have never, in Illinois, from what I can tell, we've never tracked how we spend our money to see if there's any performance-related value to our tax dollars. Mm-hmm. So consequently, we have continued to use taxpayer money in practically any way that Springfield has deemed appropriate. And we've gone down that path for 20 years, and now we have gotten into the arena of having 51 cents out of every tax dollar going to Medicaid, almost 20 cents on every tax dollar going to in the state of Illinois.
Wait, pause there. Let's go back. Say 51 cents dollar collected into
Medicaid payments.
What is Medicaid?
Well, Medicaid it's a number of things, but essentially it is payment to those people, whether they're aged, disabled, or otherwise unable to provide their own medical benefits for their own needs. The state steps in and assists them in various ways.
Okay. And then the 20 cents you said out of every dollar is going where? 20
cents out of every dollar is going to the pension payment or indebtedness that we have.
Whose pension is this?
Well, they're state employees. We
okay.
We have 5 plans in the state of Illinois. These do not include local plans like fire and police, but it has to do with all others in the state.
Who might be included in that? I mean, you know, the police and the fire would seem to be the biggest contingent of people who work for government.
Well, they're covered under a different plan. They're covered under municipal plans,
okay.
And that's different than the state plans. And they're doing quite well, and we need to make it clear. The other plans have been administered by Springfield are not at all.
Mm-hmm. Now, is this like that says that after 4 years of being in the legislature, if you're age 62 when you leave, that you get a $50,000 a year pension?
Well, similar to that. I don't know that that's a correct figure, but similar to that. We've been very generous over the years to people who work for the state. And pensions are fine as long as they're fair to the taxpayer and they're fair to the person who's going to collect the pension. The problem we have today is that because the state hasn't done some things very well, the pension systems haven't done some things very well, now the taxpayer is being asked to come in and try and repair the system with their tax dollar.
Okay. Explain that in a little more detail. I mean, how do people who claim to be broke going to take money and put it into some other fund? I'm missing something here.
Well, just as an example, one of the funds that we have in Illinois is about $85 billion underfunded, and that's on the low side. I think if you look at the actuarial numbers from that particular fund, you'd find that probably they're understating the number, therefore the underfunding is really higher. Mm-hmm. But be that as it may.
So they owe this fund at least $85 billion.
It's underfunded to the extent of
somebody owes $85 billion
into
this fund.
And I guess that somebody would be you and me and all of the other taxpayers in the state of Illinois.
What's the annual budget of the state of Illinois?
33.2 billion.
So you're talking about 3 times, so 3 years worth of budget is
That's
underfunded.
Correct. That's correct.
That's a lot of money to be underfunded.
Indeed.
Okay, so we've determined now that the state of Illinois is not fiscally sound the way it should be. Now I mean, we've had any number of state senators, state reps through here from the state of Illinois and Missouri, but from Illinois, and nobody seems to be like stupid, crazy, dumb. So how do people who are just regular folks wind up leading the state into this condition?
Well, I think, there's a couple factors. Number one, there are a segment of my colleagues who I believe work very diligently, but they work to the extent that they do things that will help them look very good in the next election. And for a state rep, that's every 2 years. Mm-hmm. There are other folks who...
Pause there. Elected to do what?
Well, they're elected to represent the best interests of the general public.
But you just said that they spend their time running to be reelected. What is the sense of being reelected if all you're doing is running to be elected and not accomplish anything in the 2 or 4 year period that you're elected to?
Well, I think different people would have a different view of what accomplishment is. To me, accomplishment would be looking at a broke state and working diligently to make sure that we can not dig ourselves a bigger hole, but start to fill it in.
Is there any sign of that that's
None.
going on?
None.
No sign of that?
No.
Okay. So are they still digging the hole, these folks?
In my opinion, we're doing just that.
And so you went there starting, I guess, January of this year, was January of 2011.
Correct.
Was the first time that you were there. And so why haven't you fixed it?
Well, first of all, I'm a Republican, and the Democrats have the majority in the House and the Senate. They also have a Democrat governor, Governor Quinn. So it's very hard when you're in the minority to take some good common sense, I think, business practices that Springfield needs to fix its problem and convince other people across the aisle who have been there a little bit longer than I have that they need to adopt those business practices to fix the state of Illinois.
Mm-hmm. What have you been doing since you've been there since January of 11?
Well, interestingly enough, being a businessman is not a bad thing in the General Assembly. One of the things that I was able to do, and I think now people are taking note of this workers' compensation reform that was passed in May.
Which people, when you say people
I think my colleagues across the aisle, the business community, and the state of Illinois in general now know that what we passed in May was not reform, and that's precisely what I told the sponsors across the aisle when they offered this bill up for a final vote.
So you're saying in May of 2011 there was some sort of change in the law affecting workers' compensation?
Well, there were a number of items in a bill which is a net, to me, has become a net zero-sum game. And I'll explain that if I could.
Go ahead.
Sponsors of this bill understood that there was a huge problem with businesses leaving Illinois having to do with workers' compensation expense. The governor knew it, Speaker Madigan knew it, President Cullerton knew it. And so there was a mad rush in the last 12 months to put committees together, have hearings throughout the state, and then put together a bill. And they did that. The problem was the bill, albeit comprehensive, really didn't address the major issue of workers' compensation in the state of Illinois.
Well, what was the issue that was edging businesses out of Illinois?
Well, it has to do with the term principal cause.
The what?
Principal cause.
Principal cause.
In other words, in most states, the work-related injury must occur on the job and no other place. Mm-hmm. In Illinois, you can be playing baseball or football, doing some other activity on a Sunday.
Company function or non-company?
No, non-company function.
Okay.
And you can injure yourself at home, go to bed, and the next morning go to work and perform your job for 2 hours, and then all of a sudden exacerbate that injury that you had playing softball, working on your car, or doing some other activity, exacerbated on the job, and that becomes compensable in Illinois. And I think you see the common sense of trying to make the legal definition of an injury in Illinois the principal cause being, or the principal place being, the business place, because that's what workers' compensation is for.
So hurt on the job.
On the job.
While performing tasks for your job.
Precisely. Precisely. Nothing more, nothing less.
Okay.
And so...
And who objects to this?
Well...
This definition?
I didn't negotiate this particular bill, but I will tell you that the unions were very much opposed to changing the legal definition of injury. Trial lawyers were irate about changing. They were very adamant, staying away from changing that definition. So those are the two parties that I believe had the most influence on the governor and leadership and that kept us from changing the definition. And by the way...
And before you go there,
yeah.
So it is because this principal cause is not clearly defined as the reason that workers' compensation is paid, that certain large businesses have left the state of Illinois. Is this correct?
That's correct. We've actually lost 386,000 tax-paying businesses in the last 12
businesses,
years.
Not jobs.
Businesses. Companies.
So about
large
a third
and
of
small.
A third of a million businesses have left Illinois.
That's correct.
They've left, or they just shut down?
No, well, I'm not sure whether I can classify that for you, but what we know is that we have 386,000 less tax-paying companies, whether they're large or small. Mm-hmm. So principal cause, or primary cause, being the workplace, is a legal definition that we should have imposed and forgotten, left out all of the, what I just consider to be nonsense of the bill that were really addressed. And here's why I say it. The authors of this bill, the people who brought it to the floor, said, you have to pass this bill because it's going to save $500 to $800 million. And that's a lot of money. Now we see from NCCI that it's no longer $500 to $800 million. At most, it may be $130 million. And it may be a zero-sum game because there's now a 3.5% advisory fee added by NCCI saying, essentially, we don't see any cost savings in your bill.
Now, this money that's being paid in workers' comp cases, where's that money come from? Is that like the general fund, or is there a dedicated fund for
Well,
this?
there's two issues there. State workers are paid by the state. But other workers who work for private companies, they're paid by those companies. You're either self-insured or you can be insured by a company who then on your behalf, and you settle up at the end of the year with that insurance company.
So it's not like the general public is picking up the tab for this problem. It is actually the business community and the state of, well, I guess it is within the state of Illinois.
No,
It is the general
taxpayers,
public.
I mean, the taxpayers are on the hook, or were on the hook, for 385 employees down at the Menard Prison who all had carpal tunnel injuries. Those cases went undefended, and consequently, the taxpayers picked up a bill for $10 million. Now, maybe they were entitled to those benefits, but they were uncontested, and I think everyone wonders why $10 million, why 385 people at the same location, and it's out of my pocket, it's out of the taxpayer's wallet.
Mm-hmm. These are guards you're talking about?
As I understand it, they were guards, and their allegation or their assertion was that they injured themselves, repetitive trauma, carpal tunnel, by opening, putting into the doors, prison doors, and opening them and then closing them. In other words, locking and unlocking the doors.
Maybe they need a clicker like on my car.
Thought?
Okay, so we've pretty well covered, unless you have any other thoughts about workman's comp that you wanted to talk about, let's move on to you're interested also in civil courts reform.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
Well, I'm again this next year going to be filing a number of the bills that I filed last year, hoping that the drumbeat will finally be heard by the leadership in Springfield. The statistics with respect to Illinois are staggering when it comes to the legal abuse that is pretty well documented, quite frankly. We have 4 counties in the state of Illinois who are on a legal watch list, which means we have 5 counties in Illinois alone that are picked out and are in the top 10 of all the jurisdictions considered to be bad in the United States of America.
What's the definition of bad?
Well, I think where abuse is determined to be.
What is legal abuse?
Well, I think it's lawsuits are frivolous, and they're filed simply to generate a settlement without going to trial.
I see. Okay. Would Madison County be in this group?
The ones that I recall are Madison, St. Clair, Cook, and now McLean County has been added.
So you're talking about southwestern Illinois and up around the Chicago.
Right, and Cook County.
Chicago and the surrounds there.
Correct. Correct.
I remember there was a time when Madison County was a point at which many river cases where anybody who was injured on the Mississippi River, apparently anywhere in the United States, they would come and file in the courts in Madison County. I thought that had been cleared up some time ago.
Well, there's been no venue reform, and I can't speak to river cases, but I can tell you that many railroads who run through Illinois often find that many lawsuits are filed in Illinois where a person either does not reside here or the injury that they're alleging didn't occur here.
Mm-hmm. Now, venue, just for those who don't know it, venue just means that the place where the lawsuit is filed, and in some states they define that they define as to where the lawsuit has to be filed when you're injured somewhere. If you're injured in Bond County, you can't come and file in some other county. It's Bond County.
Precisely.
But apparently Illinois has looser rules on where lawsuits can be filed because they find that juries are a little more generous in those areas?
Well, I think that's a good way to say it. I think the trial lawyers, at least some of them, have sensed that they will do better in some jurisdictions than they do in others.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of people, I know in Missouri that there was a tendency, and I've told this by any number of lawyers, there was a tendency to want to file in the city as opposed to in the county, because they found that settlements were much better, and jury, what's the term? When
jury
the jury,
verdicts.
The verdict and the amount of money which is being paid out or being awarded was much better in the city than it was in the county.
Right.
Although I don't know that that's still true. This is information from a decade ago.
I don't either. Yeah.
So what else? So we've covered civil, we've covered workers' comp. What other areas of interest are you working on?
Well, of course, as you mentioned in the introduction today, I had filed a bill early on in February to roll back the tax increase on business and individuals. So that obviously was not going to come out of committee. So in an effort to encourage business in the state of Illinois to stay here and possibly create jobs, I filed a bill which did several, one of which was to give credits for research and development. We do have some state-of-the-art Illinois who actually develop things through engineering and technology. I also, in that bill, suggested that we give carry forwards for net operating loss, something that all states provide to their businesses, that at least that I'm familiar with. I also suggested that we move the inheritance tax for farm-related businesses from $2 to $5 million. And several other things which I thought were very important to encourage business to stay in Illinois, because they are the job creators. Unfortunately, that bill probably is going to fail. And it's going to fail because my colleagues on the other side of the aisle determined that we had to do a couple things to make that bill better. And I don't think it's better. They decided to take away bonus depreciation, which all businesses depend on. That's called decoupling. So they wanted to decouple from bonus depreciation.
What is a bonus depreciation?
Bonus depreciation means that a company who purchases equipment in 1 year may take 50 to 100% of the depreciation on that equipment in 1 year, as opposed to spreading it out over 15 or 20 years, normal schedule, if you will. Mm-hmm. So bonus depreciation was gone, so to speak. They also decided that we should increase the earned income tax credit. Of course, that's not favorable to most businesses, frowned upon by many. And in addition to that, there were two real disincentives that I think the general public is going to see very quickly, and they're bailouts. One to Sears and the other to CME in Chicago. So essentially what we've done is take I think a good bill which was meant for good purposes to encourage business, and we've rolled in a lot of bad things to discourage business, plus bail out companies, Illinois companies. I understand that, you know, they're folks that have been here a long time, but we're still talking about a bailout that you and I are going to have to pay for.
What does Sears need to be bailed out of?
Well, that's certainly a good question. Sears, in their testimony before committee, said that the tax increase rendered at the beginning of the year, new tax law, which in essence increased their tax base 67%, said, look, we can't survive in Illinois. And CME has a little bit different issue, but it's a taxing issue, and it has to do with what you call throwback taxes. And
so what I hear you saying is that they they want an exemption. These two businesses want an exemption from the law that affects everybody else?
well, I'm not saying they want an exemption. They just want some help to get over the hump, so to speak, because of the new tax increase that was passed back in January.
Right.
Now, there's one other little feature here I need to tell you about. This earned income tax credit was supposed to be a big help to the middle class, likewise. Mm-hmm. The only problem was it's not, because the middle class now pays $760 a year more in taxes, and this bill, should it pass, will only give them back $1.25, $1.25. So again, a good bill now has become a very bad bill.
I see. You use the term earned income tax credit.
Yes.
What is that?
Well, a business, when they reach what they call their normal tax level, then is required under an earned income tax level to pay more. And that's used to then spread out and supposedly make the tax base fair for individuals in a particular state.
Yeah, I guess I'm not getting as to how it makes it to anybody that if you've already paid all the taxes that you owe, paying more is fair. What's the explanation there?
Well, I don't know that I can give you a good one because I agree with you. When you reach a cap, that is the level that you simply call your normal taxable rate, and I'm saying max,
Yes.
you think it's over and under an earned income tax credit. It's really not.
Mm-hmm. We got about 2-3 minutes left here. Time goes by fast, as you
Right.
know. Is there anything we haven't covered here in this last few minutes?
Well, I think we need to continue to work in the state of Illinois.
We being the legislature?
The legislature.
Or the people?
Well, right now, the thing that concerns me mostly is the fact that people are losing their homes because they're being overtaxed. And I hear it every day when I collected petitions.
We're talking property tax.
I'm talking about property tax.
That's a local county
That's
issue.
a local county issue, but that
School district issue, actually.
Well, it is.
Go ahead.
And we need to fix that because we have gone so far one direction in our taxing that we need to bring it back, or we're going to have a net migration out of this state that we simply can't stand. So that's a very, very big issue. We also need to deal with our pension issue in the state of Illinois. It doesn't appear it's going to happen next week in veto session. It doesn't appear to me that it's going to happen next spring. That's going to leave an even bigger hole in the ground that we talked about earlier. We keep digging ourselves further and further down.
Well, ideally, just briefly, but ideally, what would you like to see it look like at the end of the day?
Well, I would like to see a program that that's sustainable beyond 2018 or 2019, something that we can say by 2045 indeed is 80 to 90% funded, as opposed to being at this point somewhere in the neighborhood of 45% funded. That's where we need to be, because people are depending on their pension system. They're depending on those payments. And now, because of the mismanagement in the state of Illinois, we're asking taxpayers to pony up and fill the void, and I don't think they can do it.
Yeah, it's we're really down almost to the end here, and it's unfair for me to start getting into some other issues with you, so you don't have a chance to explain. I do appreciate your coming in today. I can I can sense a certain amount of frustration on your part. I remember when you were fresh and new, and you were, representative-elect, and you came here and full of fire and ready to go. But you seem to be a little more weathered.
Well, let me put it this way. The fire is still there, but you have to measure exactly what you can expect to get done when you're in the minority.
Yes. Thank you very much for being with
My
us
pleasure.
today. I've been speaking with Dwight Kay. He's state rep from District 112 in Illinois. See you folks next week.